The Cinders of Dezu, written and read by Oliver Tonic. A tyrant king, a missing girl, and a journey through a perilous world. Join me for this completed sci-fi fantasy novel, read as an audio series. Enjoy the story from here on, or binge from the beginning with the first episode. The episodes are now available on YouTube and Spotify as a podcast. Like and subscribe if you enjoy. My audiobooks are totally free. If you'd like to donate to support my writing, though, check out my Patreon in the description. And now, back to the tale. Chapter 13. Upping the Bounty. The ground continuously shifted like it was made of water. In the unrelenting claws of the sky-gazer, it might as well have been. Its ability to churn massive amounts of hard earth was nearly unmatched. Having been satisfied by its hunt earlier in the day, it was burrowing deeper and deeper toward its lair to rest. Not necessarily a thoughtful creature, the indigestion it was feeling had been growing, but it wasn't until now that it made him come to a full stop. With a solid blockade of unchurned earth in front of him, he slowly started to writhe, rubbing his face against the walls of its self-made tunnel. The writhing grew more and more violent. Skygazers were usually quiet, unless actively hunting, but the cries of the massive, thick-skinned, and blubbery beast began echoing through the underground chambers. Its writhing stopped as it laid on its back with its body contorted in an ugly arch. From the crease in its body burst forth a blade that began swiftly sawing his belly down the middle. The beast screamed and strained. Its giant, bright yellow eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets as the knife finished its work. From its open midsection, blood, innards, and a man poured out. The skygazer heaved its final haggard breath and relinquished its dark and dirt-filled existence. Firas stood up, but lost his slippery footing on the haggard flesh of the creature in the pitch black of the tunnel. He was covered in slimy substances he couldn't see. The smell overwhelmed him. What was it? Its odor was like digested mud and fertilizer. His nose crinkled. Fertilizer that used to be old bovine meat. This was going to be deeply irritating. How far down was he? He slid down the side of the body and became cramped for room between claw and cave walls. He slinked slowly between the surfaces until he reached the tail end of the monster. There wasn't a light in sight. He was going to have to smell his way out. He took a deep whiff. Immediately he coughed and nearly gagged. Maybe smell was a bad idea while covered in pungent worm viscera. Sound might make more sense. He started forward at a hobbling pace. A click rang out from his tongue. The sound was absorbed by much of the freshly moved dirt in the walls, but it was just enough to get the information he needed. He quickly sped up. He kept his stride, clicking as he went, until he found that he was going up. It was promising, and yet he was still running for some time with little to no change in the path aside from twists and turns. Finally, his clicks caught another path, a fork. The clicks told him this one was large enough that it had to be from another skygazer. He stopped. The path was older. It was hard to tell which way led above ground. He breathed in deeply. He decided he'd keep heading up the path he was on. He ran for quite a while. It was like navigating an old subway tunnel. He ran faster as he grew more confident about the length of the paths. Eventually, he caught a break. A click came back telling him he'd hit a network. This was a bunch of smaller crisscrossing pathways, vertically and horizontally intersecting with his own. They also sounded older on another investigative click. The skygazer had cut a path right through them. They were clearly organized. He approached them and touched their walls. They were rough and jagged, not like the road he'd been taking. He pulled his hand back quickly as a chill ran up his spine. His thought came out as a whisper under his breath. The Underhorde. Firas took a step back and started to continue again down the Skygazer's road. He was not about to deal with them today. The air stopped him in his tracks, though. He turned around and sniffed again. Topsoil, dead leaves, and pine. It was coming from one of the Horde tunnels. He thought about it for a moment. If they were nearby, he would be able to hear them, or even smell them. But all he could smell was the surface. That was a good sign. He clicked and leapt the grid vertically from tunnel to tunnel until he found the right one. He was right. Not a creature in sight, or in clicking distance at least. As he approached an exit, the fresh air got stronger, followed by the warm greeting of the early evening light making its way down the hole under the roots of a dead tree. Firas scrambled up its roots toward the trunk and kicked off of it. He soared high into the treetops. He landed quite precisely on a ledge and crouched in the branches, flaring his nostrils to take in the fresh air. It wasn't long before he had his bearings. This whole debacle had taken him way off course. But there was a crossover sanctuary nearby that he knew. He took a path from tree to tree until he found the hilly incline he was looking for. He jumped from the canopy and slid down it until he located an ovular boulder jutting out from the hill. He slid below it and found another smaller boulder that was wedged underneath. It looked like it propped it up, but he knew it didn't. He stuck his hand into an indentation in the rock between the top and the bottom stones. He pulled the smaller stone away. There, perfectly fitted into the space, was an oblong leather case with a strap. Firas smiled. He took it and strapped it to his back. The path from here was nearly already etched out since he'd done it enough. He decided that probably wasn't a good thing. He went back up the hill on the opposite side of the boulder and went into the trees again to avoid further engraving the trail. He followed the trail from the canopy until he reached the spot. He slid down a trunk and looked through the foliage. There it was, the back of the crossover sanctuary, peeking above the trees just a half-mile down the incline of the forested hill. He slipped the leather bag off his back and flipped it open. He pulled out a bow and quiver. He looked through the various colored feathers of the arrows until he found what he was looking for. In one sweeping motion, he pulled the red-feathered arrow from the bundle and swiped it with a flip against the bark of the tree behind him. It lit up in flames with a hiss as his hand pulled the line taut. He lined up his aim. His eye focused on his tiny, distant target. His fingers released. The arrow shot over the tops of the trees until it dipped in its arc through the wooden trunks to the small, unlit metal fire basin just at the edge of the sanctuary. Firas smiled as he saw the sanctuary guards running around, barking orders and searching the trees. He sighed and sat down, leaning his back against the tree. The setting sun brought with it a memory from years ago. A setting quite similar to this. He'd been on the hunt, watching the movement of prey in the trees when he'd heard a sound. The commotion was too much for his quarry, and it bounded off. He rolled his eyes and turned around to see a small pair of eyes peeking out from the brush. Now you know how I feel about little girls sneaking up on me and making me lose my lunch. The girl stepped out from the bushes and giggled. Isn't it dinner time? It is, but you aren't impressed that I followed your tracks? No, he said. I'm not. I taught you, and I'm a great teacher. And I wasn't hiding, so I didn't bother covering them. I could have found you anyway, she said. I'd love to see you try. Also, I'd love to know why you're playing hide and seek with people not in on the game. You should be at home. The sun is almost down. You can be out, I can be out, she said. Firas sighed. You can't run away from everyone, little one. Harper and Harbor are going to be worried sick. I'm practicing night dwelling. You know they won't let me. He smirked. And why would you want to do that, huh? You have a safe home to go to. You don't need to be out. I want to be just like the old warriors. I can help people caught outside after dark." She put her hands out and they lit up with fire. "Who better to be the light in the night than me?" "Night dwelling is a wartime strategy. Why would you need it?" Her face turned deadly serious. It was the most serious he'd ever seen an expression on someone so young. It's probably why he remembered the moment so well. "This is war." As the sun continued to abandon the valley, Firas found himself turning over the piece of wood he'd broken off in the light of the sunset. He'd carved the shape right, but it was going to be tricky detailing all the little digging appendages in the spiral shape. He brought his dagger to it again and scoffed. He spoke into the air. "I've been able to smell you for a while. The wind wasn't in your favor." Orion appeared from the trees behind him. "You gave my men quite the scare. You don't usually reach out unless—" The king looked around. "Where are they? I won't be satisfied if you kill them yourself, you know that." Firas stood up and turned to him with his hand still at his craft. "I don't have them." Orion's eyebrows raised. "And why?" "She got to him first. She's getting better." Orion's eyelids lowered. "She beat you? In a fight?" Firas sneered. "No, come on, Ori." He stopped carving and looked at him. She used my zeal against me. Wasn't as observant as I usually am." Orion shook his head and rolled his eyes. "You were cocky and she outsmarted you. This isn't the time to lose your edge, Firas. Not with what I'm about to put on the line." The hunter looked at him and turned his head with skepticism across his face. "Freedom," Orion said. "A clean ledger and a spot in the world. You can hunt, not as an outlaw, but bona fide. You can do what you do, but with my kingdom behind you." Firas's eyes widened. "This is the job? You're swapping Harper for this?" Orion pressed his lips together slightly and slowly nodded. The hunter looked at him under lowered eyebrows. "I don't know why this one means so much to you, but you know with me it's as good as done. What's the twist?" Orion cracked his knuckles with a smile. "You know me. I'll keep it interesting for you. You'll have a little competition coming your way. I'm sure the general and his men wouldn't mind a fair shake at some perks." Firas gave a slight shrug. "All right, let old Lunkhead and his boys give it a try. You just keep the offer you promised me open." "I'm a man of my word," said the king. "No, you're not, Ori," he said. Orion chuckled. "I am when I need to be." Firas slipped the knife and carving into his pockets and threw the bag over his shoulder. He began making his way into the ever-settling night. A wandering mind made him take his forge trail back to his boulder hiding spot, where he slipped his bow and quiver back. He closed up the small stone compartment and found himself tightly gripping the boulder cover in frustration. The rest of that conversation he'd had all those years ago was playing over in his mind. "Well, you'll have to get better at hide and seek, Miss Warrior," he had told her. "And I'm not training you tonight, so you'll need to get home before the things in the dark eat you up." She scoffed and started back into the bushes. "I won't need your help. I'll be the best night dweller the world has ever seen. And I'll be better at hide and seek than you, too." "You've got a long way to go, Sprite," he said. "You watch," she said as she turned around. "Firas the Great will be no match for Talia the Night Huntress." "We'll see, little one," he said. "We'll see." Hey guys, it's Oliver. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more. Give me your thoughts in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. And check my channel to make sure you're caught up on the latest episode. I'll have regular episodes up until all chapters of this story are fully released, so stay tuned.